And if you would be so kind. Do I need to say it again? Meg, if you'd be so kind as to take the roll, please.
Yes, 1 minute.
I'll go ahead and do
So
it.
Jenny Bright, Town of
Yes,
Woodville
ma'am.
Councilman, Craig Sear,
Present.
Lance Norton,
Here.
Melanie Aiken, Jill Johnson,
Here.
absent would be Janet St. Clair and Eric Marshall. We have a
Thank
quorum.
you. Thank you. Before I ask for a motion to approve the agenda, I would like to make a quick adjustment in the interest of having a quorum and move the consent agenda first. So, are there any other changes to the agenda? Could I have a motion to accept the agenda and approve the agenda as amended?
I'd move to accept the agenda as amended. It's Jill.
Thank you, Jill. Could I have a second?
Second, Craig's here.
Thank you, Craig. With that, I will, do I have to vote for that? No? Or just have to, all in favor of approving the agenda as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The agenda is approved. We'll move to the consent agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Isn't that what we just approved?
No, we approved the main agenda. Now we're approving the consent agenda.
Which is minutes from prior meetings and vouchers.
Correct.
I'd make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. Jill.
Thank you, Jill.
Craig's here. I will second the consent agenda with the understanding that the typos on page 1 and 3 with my last name will be corrected.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda with the caveat that the corrections that Craig pointed out will be made. All in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you for approving the consent agenda. The next item that we have is a presentation and public hearing, and Todd is going to introduce that.
Right, so thank you, everybody. We're glad that we had a quorum to do our action items, and those of you that have to go, we've accomplished that part, but we do have a good meeting ahead of us. And this is the second month for consideration and discussion of a proposal for our rideshare van pool program fares. And with us today is Stacy Jordan, who's our program and rideshare specialist. She's just going to give a quick rundown of what they have learned from each of the rideshare groups, and also a summary of the proposal. And then once she's done, and if you could wait with questions until she's done with the presentation, then there'll be an opportunity for discussion. No action today. We're going to ask that you consider taking action at your next meeting, if that's okay. And so, Stacy, please.
All right, so just to kind of familiarize everybody or refresh everybody about the program, we've been in operation since 1988. And the mission of the rideshare program is to reduce Island County's carbon footprint, traffic congestion on the roads, ferries, and limited parking areas, and caused by single occupancy vehicle trips, and supply commuting services to people who may not have access to personal vehicles or whose commutes don't line up with available transit options. Our program is open to workers and university commuters who either start or end their commutes in Island County, start or end. We provide the vehicle, the fuel card or electric subsidy, insurance and maintenance, and the participants provide volunteer drivers and pay a monthly fee. Some employers do offer subsidies that offset the cost of the fare. We also offer preferential ferry loading and unloading, and it allows the groups to travel in the HOV lanes. Good to go passes are provided to cover the toll lanes. And last year with just 27 vehicles on the road, you can see that we traveled almost 419,000 miles, provided almost 68,000 shared passenger trips, helped save tens of thousands of FOB trips, and provided hundreds of Island County residents with an option, with an affordable and sustainable commute option. And then as we talked about at our last one, Mark, this is Mark, he's the one that has gone over 1 million miles and, is probably our biggest advocate for, the rideshare program. And he is still with us today. The current participants' feedback to the proposal that we presented to you last month. A lot of the encouraging responses, ease of reporting, the fare's not fluctuating from month to month. It's easier to promote and get riders, and they're paying less, or at least some of them are paying less out of pocket. Some of the questioning responses were, some may have to pay a little more out of pocket. The people riding in vehicles for shorter distances would have to pay the same as those who ride longer. And currently, they may not have to. And how do we accommodate occasional riders? And then, so this was, again, what we had presented to you, before. We did add on there, the possibility of having a daily round trip miles, fare. So for those occasional riders that ride, 4 or 5 times a month, maybe a $10 or $15 a day, that's subjected to whatever, the preference is. It could go lower. Yeah, so this is basically the same. Everything else is pretty much the same on that. So the potential group impact by the current options under option 1, you can see how many groups were affected and would pay 0 out of pocket because their subsidy is enough to cover. Their fare may go up a little bit, but it's still under their subsidy. So there were 5 of those. There were 4 groups that would pay 1 to 10. And 3 groups that would pay 11 to 50. There's only 1 group that would pay between $51 and $75 more out of pocket. And then, the numbers in parentheses after that are because there are 2 groups that fit into several categories right now, because not everybody pays the same fare. So that's what those indicate. There's only the 2 groups, so, that are affected. And then there are 8 groups that the fare would 56 groups were 6 whose fare would go up, but they would 1 group 1 to 10, 50 more out of pocket, and 0 groups that would pay 50. There are 5 groups whose fare would go down, $1 to $20, 7 groups whose fare would go down 21 to 50, and 9 groups whose fare would go down by 51 to 100. There are some groups that will have riders that pay different amounts out of pocket due to whether they have subsidies or not. And there is, I think, 1 group that not everybody has subsidies in. So, and that's pretty much it. And again, the timeline of what we anticipate, with the decision being made on April 5th, we would then notify our rideshare participants that if it was approved, what the next steps would be. The last day for payment based on the old system would be April 10th. There would be no payment in May, but the June payment would be made. There would be a payment made June 1st through 10th, but it would apply to the month of May. So they're not getting a free month. We're just switching from paying in advance to paying back in arrears is basically how it would amount. And then, so then by June 10th, everybody should have been paid for May. And we will already have their subsidies from Boeing or whatever by June for May, by the time they're making those May payments. Were there any questions?
You knocked mine out as you were talking. Down, you'll answer.
Good.
I have a question. I can't figure out how to raise my hand.
Okay,
Can you help me understand any cash flow impacts to paid after the fact versus in advance? Like, is there any like fixed cost predictive models we would need to have? I guess,
oh, go ahead.
you see what I'm very cloudy headed. So if you could like fill in the thought process for me, I would be very indebted right now.
Okay, we used to always pay in arrears, but when we went to, when COVID hit, and we weren't collecting a fare, we took the opportunity to move to a pay in advance system, and it was mainly because to more align ourselves with the way the subsidies were paid, but also because people would often leave the program, not realizing they still needed to pay their fare for that month. And so we ended up with a lot of people that we had to go collect money from. A lot of that is resolved now. We don't seem to have that issue. And I think with the flat rate fare, the subsidy won't be as big of an issue because people won't have to continually change it. Whereas before, fares would change, they'd have to change their subsidy, but it was a question of, well, is it going to go into effect in time for this next fare, this next payment month or not? It was just very confusing. So we went to the prepayment and now we just, with the flat rate, it just makes sense to go back to the paying in arrears. There's no difference in the cost or the fare structure. I mean, as far as what we get, it doesn't change any of that. It's just how we process it.
Okay, so you're not worried that we could get out there with costs and then have people not pay and then we couldn't cover our costs?
No, I'm not. We tend to we tend to be able to collect the fare eventually. It might take a little longer than it would if they were paying it on time, but even with the paying in advance, there are still people that don't pay on time. So it's always, that part's always going to be an issue. I don't see it as being an overwhelming problem or something that's going to cause us financial despair.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I think just in follow-up to Jill's question, is it possible to kind of get an idea of what that sum would be of monies that would be paid in arrears?
Well, it would be the same. It's the same fare, whether it's paid in arrears or forward. It's just a difference of when they pay it.
I mean, just the total across all of the users.
How much money?
How much money would it be that we would, that would be, that we collect,
It's about
that we collect
20,000.
and defer? I'm
About
sorry.
20,000 a month.
Okay.
Thank you.
Jill, does that answer your question? That's about 20,000 in arrears.
That's
Potentially.
great. Thank you. Yeah, that did. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Paul knows those numbers off the top of his
Yeah.
head. He's like a magician.
I'd have to go look, so. Any other questions?
Craig has a question.
Okay.
Right, I wanted to, actually, this may be a question for Todd. When is the board going to be talking about which option is more attractive? Is that something you're expecting us to do now? And are we going to have a discussion about aspects of the option of each of these options? Or are we just having questions to get ready for the public hearing?
So I would suggest that you share what you think is best now. You can also do that in April, when you are hopefully gonna make a decision. And if you're not able to make a decision in April, then we can punt another month, but there's no reason why it's out of order or inappropriate, council members here at this point in time for you to share that information. And if anyone wants to ask you questions, that's great. And then we can redo it in April, but it might also help staff to hear a little bit about what you're thinking, if you're thinking of making some drastic change or something. So I'd say do it now, please.
Okay, so I do have one suggested change. I sent this my thinking to Stacy, and I have a real concern about the occasional rider fare. So for the board to understand my concern, just, because I manage a van pool in the Island Transit System, we have a very short, trip of 25 miles round trip each day. And, the cost to a rider is about 10 cents per mile. Now, it's covered by a subsidy for many of us, but nonetheless, the actual cost that Island Transit charges is 10 cents per mile. And so therefore, if we had an occasional rider show up who wanted to ride up the hill to an employer along the way, like for example, the Olympic middle school where we drop off several teachers, the minimum or the lowest cost here is $10 per day for an occasional rider fare. And that would be 40 cents per mile, which is four times the cost of what we
Craig,
as
why don't
riders are. What's that?
video and audio from you, could you help?
Is my audio better now? Hello? No audio?
You keep freezing up our side, but if you take your video.
I don't know what to say here. Can you hear me? Hello?
I hear Craig great and not the transit room great.
Me too, Melanie.
Okay.
too. It's gonna be us, our internet.
Is it us? Okay.
Yeah.
And then I just kicked Craig off. I apologize, people. And now we just have Matt. Matt, we have you on the big screen.
Can you hear
Hello?
me? Hello?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was trying to say that the structure of the occasional rider fares would be 300% higher than for a regular rider. And honestly, I think I would feel embarrassed to tell an occasional rider walking up to the van, you're gonna have to pay $10 to ride 10 minutes up the hill. $10 is, I mean, it's a reasonable amount of money, and but it doesn't feel friendly. It doesn't feel welcoming. We, Island Transit, I don't think needs $10 from its occasional riders. And so my proposal is that the occasional rider fare be half, of what's listed here. So $5 per day, if it's 0 to 100 miles. Um, I, I have a second observation here, and that is I am definitely supporting option number 2. Island Transit is a fare-free system, as we all are proud of. And we're not quite telling the truth when we say that, because our van pool program is is um, is charges 100% fares. I mean, it's a standalone program, and the users of the program pay sort of full freight, if you want to say that. There's no contribution other than staff time, certainly, taking nothing away from you, Stacy. But thank you for including, like, option 2 would be a little bit more than $2,000 a month. So instead of a 100% charge, if we went with this route, or with this option, Island Transit would be supporting option 2 riders with a 15% subsidy, whereas they support everybody else with a 100%. I mean, we charge no fares anywhere else. The comments that came in from the public, there was concerns about increased costs on some of the van pools, and several of them were students. And Island Transit can absolutely support a $2,000 a month cost if we went with this flat fare option number 2. We'll get to that in a minute when Paul presents our finances, and I'll call it out at that time. But I really want to recommend to the board that we support option 2, this proposed flat rate fare that's shown there. I think that is the one that is most supportive And Island Transit certainly has the ongoing operational revenue to support it. So that's my position on it. Thank you.
Can I ask him a question? Craig, this is Stacy. Just a question for the student rate. We had proposed 75. I think on your presentation, it shows 50 to 75. What would be your preference there?
Can you?
It's a kind of a star in the corner there. It says 50 to 75.
Oh, I see. Consider a flat rate for students of 50 to 75. Well, they're students. And we want to aim towards the lower fares. So I mean, I would certainly support $50. How many students do we have in the system right now?
We just have one student group. They go up to Western Washington University. But I think Joanna had interest from another group as well. Their commute, currently on the fare now, they're paying almost $200, to commute. At least some of them are, and, you know, they're students. They don't work necessarily, on a regular basis. So,
Right.
we were hoping to at least get the 75, but, you know, if you're amenable to 50, then I think they would love that.
Yeah, I definitely support 50. I definitely support 50. And I guess I would take this opportunity now to say that when we review Paul's normal monthly finance report, we typically see that our operational expenses do not come anywhere close to the revenue that arrives via sales tax. And so, I mean, it's on the order of hundreds of thousands of dollars. So $25 for 3 or 4 students in one Vanpool group, and if we add a second one, I mean, it doesn't, rounding error doesn't even touch how insignificant it is.
Okay.
I have a question. So what constitutes an occasional rider?
Well, that would be to be determined. We were thinking, anyone that rides like 5 or fewer days a month. But it could be, you know, 2 days a week. You have to keep in mind that they're taking a seat from a full-time rider, so, that's a seat that they can't have a regular full-time rider, and so, should they pay the full fare, or, you know, if they're only riding once a week, I can see that. If they're riding 2 or 3 days a week, I think they should pay, at least 3 days a week, they should pay the full fare, but whether you want to do 1 or 2 days a week, you know, that has to be determined. If you're not concerned with it, then I would say, you know, maybe 6 to 8 rides a month, or fewer, 8 or fewer rides a month could constitute an occasional ride.
I was just trying to get my
Yeah,
brain out of that. Craig,
If
for
I-
those, oh, go ahead, Craig.
In practice, occasional riders, at least I have found, doesn't really happen that much. And the way I think about an occasional rider is they truly are unpredictable. They just suddenly walk up to us on the ferry and ask, "Hey, do you have space today?" Or they'll text early in the morning, can I get a ride? And it happens once a month or less usually. And I think maybe a decent definition might, and I'd be interested to hear from Stacy about this, but it seems to me that if somebody like rides, you know, Mondays, 1 day a week, that's not an occasional rider. That person is there on Mondays. And, you know, I know we are trying to maximize ridership. And so if a full-time rider showed up, they might bump that person out. But in my mind, an occasional rider is somebody that shows up sort of unpredictably less than once a week. So just maybe say 4 times or less per month.
so we have occasional riders, with us have pretty much been somebody who rides on a regular basis, but they only ride once or twice a week, but with the understanding that if they got a full-time rider, they would be replaced by that rider, and then they could only ride when they had space available. We never defined it as somebody who's not technically on the books as a rider, but we considered it like 4 times or less, 4 to 5 times or less a month. So if Craig agrees with that, then I think that's probably what we would go with.
Well, and we don't need to solve the problem right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we should hear if there are other comments, and then, I don't know if there's any public that wants to also provide additional comments to what have already been provided through staff.
Meg, do we have anybody from the public online?
No, we don't.
Okay. All right, well, with that, I will close the public hearing. Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you.
We still need to do the public comment, even though we don't have public.
I would just.
Okay, this is the time set aside for members of the public to speak to the board about subjects of concern or interest. All items not already set aside for a public hearing. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Public comments may be ended or modified if the comments become disruptive or not germane to business at hand. Input requiring lengthier comments is best submitted in writing. Are there any public comments? Hearing none, I will close the public comments and go to business item number 1.
And that is Sean Harris, our operations manager, is going to review a proposal for some rules regarding our on-demand service. And again, we're not expecting a decision today. We're just opening this up. At next month's meeting, there will be a public hearing and potentially a decision by the board if you're ready at that time. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you. So what we provided you is just a draft on no-show policy. And I'll kind of explain what the no-show policy is and what it's to address. So the no-show policy would be for only our on-demand service, not paratransit or not fixed route, just on demand. And so what is a no-show? It's when a person schedules a trip on demand service either 24 hours in advance or the same day or via the app. Or if they call in or if they have a standing order, then they don't take that trip for whatever reason, it's a no-show. The rider does have an opportunity to cancel. They need to call us and cancel within an hour before their trip. That takes a no-show off the table. We're like, thank you. That gives us time to plan accordingly. Even though that's a tight window, we're still able to plan. When we're not able to do that, what we're doing is we're scheduling operators. Say you call the day before, you set up a trip, say you have 3 trips that took for tomorrow. We have an operator scheduled, a bus scheduled for that trip. And then when we pull up, if you're not ready, which happens a lot of times, and if you remember, we're scheduling with an algorithm system. So it's saying, okay, we've picked you up and now we're moving on to the next so we can adhere to the schedule. When you're not ready, oftentimes we've got to keep going or else we're going to get behind, and we commingle our paratransit. And if you remember, on demand is an above and beyond type service. And so our paratransit, it can't affect the paratransit. So if I have someone that's going to dialysis and you're not ready, we have to keep going, hence a no-show. Say I have a no-show in the morning at this particular time, I have a couple in the afternoon. I've probably got 2 drivers scheduled for that. And once that's canceled, I could have condensed that schedule into one schedule for the day, saving 2 drivers, saving overtime that we're working a lot of right now, and just manpower hours. We can definitely schedule more efficiently. And so that's why we're presenting this. Agencies across the country are dealing with it. We had someone represent us at a conference, and this was kind of the big talk. Hey, we got this on demand and it's great, but hey, what do we do about people that don't honor their trips? It really is an abuse to the system. When you have an out, you can call in and cancel, and that's all that we ask that you do. Once a trip is booked, it's then placed on the schedule for the day, assigned to a bus, and then to an operator. So what this is saying, just in a nutshell, is our proposed policy. And we looked through several policies, I mean, from all different agencies, and we tried to come up with what we think would work for us and help us with the schedule. And the schedule efficiency, and obviously that'll be up to the board to kind of decide, you know, the parameters they want to go. But we set 5 no-shows within a 30 rolling day period without proper cancellation would result in a 15-day suspension from the on-demand portion of the service. So that means you would still be able to ride fixed route if you're able to get to the bus stop or whatever, you can still do that. But we're just not gonna let you continue to book on-demand trips for the day once you've reached that threshold. After that, each 5 no-show violations, so 5 more no-shows in that rolling 30-day period would then result in a 30-day suspension from, again, just the on-demand portion of that. You would still be able to ride the fixed route. After a third, a warning letter would be sent after a third confirmed no-show. We do realize things happen and we would take those on a case-by-case basis. You may have had a medical emergency that you couldn't get to the door and the ambulance had to come get you, and we find that out after the fact, you know, we're probably gonna, you know, charge you for that. I mean, we understand that. We just, you know, want people to be reasonable when they're using the service. And then after a 5 violation again, we'd send out a suspension letter. And then that would start, it would also give you the information that the dates of the suspension would start. We'd also send out instructions on how to appeal the decision. And then, as I just stated, you know, there could be exceptions to a no-show on a case-by-case basis. And as I stated in the beginning, this information is just informational at this time, and then we would come back to you at another board meeting for hopefully a vote to enact this policy. So with that, I take any questions.
Any questions from the board?
Hey,
Is everybody off mute? Okay,
Jim?
thanks, Sean. Hearing no questions, we'll move on to business item number 2, and Sean, I think that's you as well.
Yes. All right, did you want to say anything?
No, thank you.
Okay, so, what we did, and I see a lot of people aren't here today, and we kind of knew that we had some new members and they kind of asked about ridership. And so we took a snapshot of some of the ridership. And this isn't all inclusive, because what we're gonna do is come back with the performance standards, and it'll get in depth with cost per rider, cost per trip. And it'll have all of our information, but some of this information, you know, we just started some of the routes for on-demand in September, such as the 2C in Camino. So we don't have a full year, so we're taking snapshots of what we've got, just to kind of give you an idea of what the ridership's looking like. Next slide. And so this is just a summary of our on-demand ridership, kind of nice chart to kind of show you what's going on. Don't be too alarmed. November, December, January is oftentimes that our ridership is lower. We've got several holidays in there, and then we also had a snowstorm in which particular zones were shut down for the full week. And for a system for our size, that makes all the difference when you see a week's worth of ridership gone. And what this is totally talking about our on-demand ridership, which is the 2C, which is on Camino, the 58, which is on the south end of Whitby, the Route 3, which is northeast Oak Harbor, the 6, which is from Oak Harbor to Coopville to the ferry, and then our base service. And we took a snapshot of this from October through January. So again, This is a lower portion, in the summer, our ridership is obviously a little bit higher, but you'll see all of that when we do the performance standards. And then just the individual breakdown, on the zone 2C, we saw a reduction, you can see there in the chart, we had 35% reduction. Again, this is gonna be the reoccurring theme. We had holidays, 3 different holidays. We had weather-related event in there as well. So on the zone 58, we're happy about that. That particular zone has seen an increase. And remember on that zone, that's Skagit Head area. And that's a service we were able to return after not having it for several years. So I think people are happy to have that, and we hope to see those numbers continue to rise. So on the zone 3, that's our northeast of Oak Harbor. We've got a decline on that particular run. And again, on that, the reoccurring theme with that, it's this time of the year. And that particular zone 3 is one of the routes that when we have snow, you can almost bet it's gonna be one of the ones that's gonna be affected. It was shut down for at least a week. At that time, it was just pure ice out there, and so that's going to show you why that graph is declining in that area. So for our zone 6, again, that's Oak Harbor to Cookville to the ferry. We did see a decline from December and January on that particular run. We had we pulse off the ferry, so the ferry had some cancellations. We had cancellations due to weather. So all of that's going to impact that. And some of those riders also can catch the Route 1 also, not the ones coming off the ferry, but ones that are in Cookville. So they will have moved over to that service. One of the things that we did talk about with our marketing department is they're working with Jefferson Transit to get more information out on the Port Townsend side of the house, so they know what to expect. They know these services are available. I think we did a good job of letting Whidbey know, but we need to let other areas know that, hey, if you come here, you can use these services. So we need to educate them. And then also, they created a how-to guide, which is on the website, which is a really good guide to kind of show you how to use those services as well. And then on our base service, different things happen on the base, different personnel that are there at different times of the year. Again, this is, still the same, the holidays and the snow events. And there were times that the base let us know that they were closed. So that's gonna affect service. When we're talking about the base service, we're talking about 5 to 8 in the morning, and we're talking about 3 to 6 in the evening. And I say that because we're proud of having the one day of 14 people go onto the base. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but you're talking about within a 6-hour time period. And when the base, when we worked with the base, one of their main goals was to reduce the amount of cars on the base. So you got 14 cars potentially off the base in that one day. If we can continue that habit, I think that would go a long way for that. So doesn't seem like much, but we're happy with that. And so this is just a kind of combination of adding in the paratransit and the on-demand. This is just a little snapshot of what we do daily and weekly on-demand. We're putting out about 8 buses a day, sometimes 10. So I'm cautious on that particular number because at any given day, when we get overloaded or we get, a bunch of those cancels, we're putting out more buses to cover other scheduled trips. So I would say 8 to 10 on that particular one. And then the number of paratrips average per bus. So we're doing about 21 trips per bus. We're doing about 8 buses per day. And then we're doing about 4 of those per bus is going to be on demand per day. So we have a big para ridership. And so when you say, well, if there's only 4, people on that bus per day for on-demand, well, what are they doing? Well, they're doing para most of that time. And so on-demand schedules, and they may put an on-demand onto that bus at that time, but it's always filled with para. I mean, that's just the way it goes. Now, we have more trips, some periods of the year than others. And this is a slower period, as you can see, those two combined. Number of trips total per weekday is about 185. In the summer, we get upwards of about 230 to 250 a day, just para. So that's not counting the additional on-demand we've taken on, so. So then we kind of move on to fixed route, and what we did on fixed route, we just took a snapshot of January to January. And again, there are different times of the year that the ridership is higher, but we just figured we'd stick with where we are right now. And you're looking at our Whidbey rural routes, the 6, the 58, and the 60. And we saw a decrease, 35% decrease on the 6. Again, we talked about the increase on the 58. The 60 also saw a decrease, and staffing thinks that may be affected to Boeing layoffs as well as other factors that attribute to that decrease.
And Sean, the on-demand services that overlap with these would also take numbers away from.
That is correct. So that's correct. They have a different way to do it now. So the Whidbey connectors, on those, we're happy with that. We've seen increases on our 1, our 411W, and our Clinton commuter. And you can see the increases there, 3%, a 9%, and an 11% increase on the commuters. So then we move on to our Camino City route. That's our Stanwood route, and we've seen a decrease on there. The chart looks worse than it is. It's a 4% decrease. I was looking at that and thinking, why does that look so different? It looks really not. But keep in mind, you do have the ability to catch on demand into Stanwood, and so that takes away those traditional fixed route Stanwood riders. Because now they can kind of go on their schedule, so. So the Camino connectors have also seen increases on our 411C and our 412C. You see the increases there on the screen.
And those are the routes that go to Everett and Mount Vernon.
Thank you for that. I just assumed that we all know those and. So our Camino rural routes, that's the 1 and the 2. So the 1 has kind of remained kind of the same. And the 2, we made some changes with that. As I mentioned in September, we went to on demand. So those numbers are kind of off in the beginning when we went to on demand. From the chart I showed you originally, we started to increase in November, and then December, January, we've had our holidays and weather event that has brought that number down. So we hope to see that increase going forward. And then just a few ridership facts. So ridership last week was up 55% compared to the week before. But it was a snow week and we had some cancellations and shorter days. Compared to 1 year ago, ridership was up about 10%. And this obviously is the fixed route here. And then services for on-demand, we realize that we see a decrease and that we got to watch those closely. We got to market those to the public. It offers many benefits, so we've got to be able to educate the public on those benefits and how that can benefit them by using the service. We talked about in our last meeting, adding live dispatching at the end of January, which has been going very good, because what that is essentially another set of eyes that's looking at that schedule to see someone who's been on the bus for, an hour and a half. It may fit within the guidelines, but we recognize that's not the best service. I mean, people have different places they need to be, they have to use the restroom, they have all kind of things why I don't want to be on the bus for an hour and a half. And so by doing this, what's happened is our on-time performance rating has jumped up to 92%. We were at about 89% before that, and we see that steadily increasing by putting these parameters in place. What we're doing is if a bus is running behind, we're able to move trips in real time, whereas before we were letting the machine do that, and all the time, that's not the correct answer. And we know that just by some of the, comments we've gotten from people that have been in those situations. So, we've moved up our on-time performance rating. And then also keep in mind that no-show policy, if the board was to approve that, that would help with our efficiency, and it would also help with our manpower hours. So when we're concerned about, working all the overtime and not having to cut service, when I've got people that are scheduled and then they go to someplace and they're not needed, and we could have used them later in the day at different times. That's what we're looking at when we're talking about the no-show policy. And with that, I will take any questions. And again, that's a small snapshot. We will come back with a full performance standards, and you'll be able to see a real good view of what the system is doing.
Questions from the board?
I have a couple questions, Sean. Thank you for the presentation. Does the on-demand reservation system allow for repeating reservations so that it minimizes the phone calls you receive?
It does. I mean, you can go in there and you can book different trips throughout the day if that's what you're talking about, or you can also be put on what's it called, a reoccurring, yes. And so you're hooked up on a standard trip, and it just books you that automatically every week.
So for example, you could say Monday at 8 a.m. Monday's 8 a.m. every Monday, or every Monday, Tuesday. I will be here at 8 a.m. and I want to go here. That's possible, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Also, obviously not now, but at some future board meeting, I wonder if it would be possible to produce a report that comes out of the reservation system that would summarize the destinations of the on-demand riders. So for example, in the Zone 58, where are people wanting to go? Do they go to Clinton? Are they headed for Oak Harbor? Do they want to come into Langley? Or do they just want to go to Bayview, to the Goose to do shopping? It would be a fascinating report, and I'd recommend it to you if that's possible.
Okay, we'll take a look at that and we'll get back with you on that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I had a couple.
All right.
I actually had the same question that Craig had, which is to look at the no-show volumes by whatever, destination or pickup or, area. I don't know what that looks like. And I think it would be interesting also just to have that no-show count in general. Just so that, because I know you're trying to mitigate that with, the penalties for no-shows, but it would still be interesting to kind of understand that. And then, do you tend to see a lift like in the spring for para when we've got Special Olympics for 3 different sports in the north end and 3 different sports in the south end? Do you tend to see greater volumes in para?
I will have to look at that
Okay.
and report back to you on that, 'cause I don't know that off the top of my head.
Yeah, I just know I got the email for registration and
Mhm.
it kind of comes out from the county, et
I
cetera.
know we're busier
Yeah.
when that time comes.
You got swimming, you got bowling, you got
Yeah,
track and field, you got bocce, you got all
Mhm.
kinds of stuff. So I just wonder.
okay. And then, on the volume of your no-show, just to give you a sample, I asked this question yesterday. So if we're doing like 30 trips on demand, in a day, and then you're getting 7 to 10 of those are no-shows on a busy day, that gives you your percentage right there.
Yeah.
That kind of skews the system.
Yeah, that's extremely helpful. Thank you, Sean.
Okay, thank you.
At this time, we'll move on to the executive director report.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks all the board members, including the ones who are fallen ill that are still participating. We're grateful that you're with us today. Thank you for that. And want to thank staff for the great presentations that they made. We had a historic week last week. We actually received our first bus vehicles that are battery electric. Very exciting. 2 of them came here to Island Transit, and thankfully, thanks to the good work of our facilities and maintenance team, we actually have chargers in place so that we can charge them and use them. It's gonna be a while before these battery electric vehicles are from Lightning Motors will be able to be in service. We need to do some commissioning, adding some things to them, getting them ready, but they will be used for paratransit and on-demand service. We have 9 more of them on order. The likelihood of us getting those from the same manufacturer is up in the air, unfortunately, because that manufacturer is in receivership, and they're having problems right now, which is common in the bus manufacturing industry. Very unfortunate, but we're really excited to have our first ever battery electric vehicles that we'll be using for our bus service. A big deal. Wanted to update you on Terry's Corner Staff Support Facility. That's our bathroom and break room that we are going to build at our park and ride on and transit center on Camino Island. We are still waiting, unfortunately, for the Department of Transportation's Real Estate Division to complete their work. They are insisting, as you know, that we pay a fee for having a building there, and we're still waiting for that to conclude. We keep trying to apply pressure and to get that done, and I'm hopeful that will happen any minute. At around Christmas time, they told us they would be able to complete this calculation by June, and we're hoping it will happen sooner than that. Did want to mention on the staffing front that we had a substantial increase in staff last month, actually an increase of 7 staffers, and we now have 136 employees. We have an additional coach operator, that 1 more than we had the month before. Also want to mention the community surplus vehicle program is underway, and you might recall, those of you who've been on the board for a while, that we did this a couple of years ago. Bring them in, please. And that was a very successful way for Island Transit to put to use surplus vehicles that now are being used by different community organizations that have transportation needs. And we have 4 vehicles that will be granted to the nonprofit groups that we vet for this particular program. And at our April 5th board meeting, we are hoping that we will be able to make recommendations to you, the board, to approve the award of 4 of those vehicles to 4 different organizations. So stay tuned for that. And I have previously sent out to you the link for that program on our website. So if you know any organizations that might benefit from this, please let them know that we'd love to receive an application from them. We received a lot of interest in the program, and we're very excited about it. We appreciate your support. And I would just point out, this was a program several years ago that board member Norton suggested that we undertake, given our surplus vehicle situation at the time, and we're really glad that we did that. On a legislative update front, just to let you know, the state legislature is getting ready to conclude their regular session, and we're waiting to see if things continue to be all right, particularly with regard to the budget. And so far, so good. It looks like the transit programs in the state legislative supplemental budget are funded at the levels that we were expecting. No surprises there. On the federal level, as you know, obviously we're concerned about the fact that the federal government's still operating under a continuing resolution, and we're hopeful that they will actually, at some point, Congress and the president enter into an actual fiscal year 2024 appropriations bill. That's important to us at Island Transit, because in that bill will be a $4 million congressionally directed spending request by Senator Murray and Senator Cantwell for our South Whidbey Island Transit Center project. And so we really want that to happen. We believe that at some point they will have a bill. I'm not assuming that it will happen this immediately, or like today, I'm assuming that there'll be another continuing resolution, but we hope in the months to come that will happen. And then also on the state level, just want to again mention Initiative 2117. That's the initiative that seeks to repeal the Climate Commitment Act, which will go to the voters in Washington State in November. Obviously, there are some impacts to Island Transit's funding if that initiative were to happen, because some of the funding that we do receive, just like other programs and projects across the state, some of the funding we do receive comes from the Climate Commitment Act. It's about the transit support grants, which we receive. That's money that's supposed to help make it easier to be fare free for youth. We receive a little bit less than $1 million a year from that. So that would be a big hit in that one. And there are some other grant programs as well that potentially will impact us. We are doing an analysis of that, and I will provide that to the board at a later date. And we'll certainly share that with the public as well. Also wanted to mention, we still are scheduled to have our board retreat on March 28th. Looks like, unfortunately, we're not going to be at the Pacific Rim Institute just down the road. They're already booked, but we will either be probably at the Best Western Hotel, or we have another option where we can rent an appropriate room and have appropriate food as well. So that will stay on schedule as is, just the location might change. Also wanted to just mention a couple things. One was, there was a comment earlier about the fact that we charge fares on our dam pools. And yet we also, when we're talking about Island Transit, say we're fare free. And I just want to be clear that that's a common expression in the bus transit industry when you don't charge a fare for bus service. And so that's why transit agencies across the country who are fare free don't charge a fare for the bus service, but also have a van pool program where they do charge a fare. They still call themselves fare free. And while technically that may be incorrect, when it comes to terms of art and what people are familiar with, that's the correct way to explain how we operate, is in fact fare free. Also wanted to mention, there was a comment about our sales tax and our other revenues that we have, and the fact that our operating expenses stay low. That's great. We're glad that we're able to do that. And part of the reason why the budget is the way it is we also budgeted to have more service hours. Remember, it's the final piece of Island Transit Maximized to have evening service added. And so that additional money in the budget will allow us to do that once we have the staff and the capacity to do that, which we're hoping will be later this year. Also want to mention, you might have seen, if you looked carefully at the agenda, where my report is listed, it also says jury duty transport. And there was a question that came up through Commissioner Bacon from a Camino resident about would it be possible for Island Transit to have special bus service from Camino Island for those Camino residents who have been summoned to do court duty 60 miles away at the Coopville Courthouse. And unfortunately, it appears that that's not something that Island Transit is able to specifically do at this time. It's more of a, let's look at how we can improve the service that we have, because right now there is bus service from Camino Island. It's just difficult to do, but you could take a bus, one of our Island Transit buses, all the way to Mount Vernon Station, where you would transfer to a Skagit Transit bus, which would take you to March's Point, and then you transfer to the Island Transit bus from March's Point that takes you across Deception Pass into Oak Harbor, and you'd have to transfer to another bus that would then take you down to Coopville. So it's possible, but it's really time consuming. And so really our focus needs to be on improving that system. The other aspect that's really important to this question is the reality that there are not jury trials very often in Coopville. It's very infrequent. I was speaking to the court administrator just yesterday, and apparently there's a trial that looks like it will be held next week, but it's been several months since they've had one, and that's pretty normal. So obviously it would be difficult for us to help with something like that isn't on a regular schedule, and that's because of scheduling our workers and also the expense of having a bus that basically travels just for a very specific group of people. It would be hard. It's also difficult because even if there is a trial, sometimes the trials or the jurors are excused earlier than a 4:30 end time, and so it makes it really difficult to schedule. So unfortunately, I don't see a way possible at this point in time that we can help with that. Obviously, individuals who are called to jury duty and don't have transportation from Camino or can't drive at night, there are ways that the court can either excuse them or grant them a different period of time to provide their jury duty. But I just wanted to get back and share with you that information. And finally, really am excited today because we have two new staff members at Island Transit that are behind me, and I just want to introduce the board to them. I wish that more of you were able to meet them in person. We're glad that our vice chair, Councilmember Bright, is here, but I'm really pleased to introduce to you, and maybe you guys can just stand up next to me here so that they can see you online. But immediately next to me is Brad Windler. Brad is now our planning manager. He just started today. Really excited to have Brad. He comes to us from Skagit Transit, has a long background. He actually went to school, has a master's degree in planning and a long history in transit, and he knows us really well, which is great. And we know him well, and so we know we got a good one. And we're just joining us as our planning manager. Daniel Heberling, and Daniel will be our finance manager. You'll recall that we're splitting some of the responsibility. Dan will be responsible for accounts payable, payroll, and procurement. And then Dan comes to us most recently from the city of Blaine, but again, he has a long history, both working for accounting firms and for jurisdictions in a finance role, also doing payroll and other things. So we're really, really lucky because we know that he has the critical day-to-day function. Dan and Brad, and we're really excited to have both of you here. Thank you. And that concludes my comments. If anybody has any questions, sit down. Be pleased to try to answer them.
Any questions from the board online? I see Melanie's smiling face.
I do have a question, two questions actually.
Sure.
Todd, in your report, you mentioned the tree seed property and that we're working with Whidbey Community Land Trust. Do you have any more details? I mean, that's, there's not much there.
You're talking in terms of my report regarding the acreage, the tree farm?
Right. I mean, are we,
Yeah.
have we found some candidate properties where we can start the swaps, or are we still
There-
exploring, or what's up?
So what's up is, the land trust is working on that in communication with us. Nothing has specifically been, offered, but we continue to be talking with them. We have, 2 years to do this. Obviously, we hope to do it sooner than that, but nothing at this time.
Okay. And then,
Any other
regard-
questions? Oh, Greg, go
yes,
ahead.
yeah, second question, below that regarding staffing. It looks like we increased, we have an increase of 1 from the previous month. You mentioned that there were 4 new operators that started. And so it looks like, doing a little bit of math that's relatively simple, it looks like we had 3 departing coach operators. Is that correct?
I think so. We did have some departing, our HR and finance. Yeah, we had 3 that did depart, including transfers being promoted to other positions within the agency, so they're no longer dispatchers, excuse me, no longer coach operators. So yes,
So-
that's,
Just for the, I always pay very close attention to this section of your report. And I'd really encourage board members to watch this closely, because we cannot expand our service in the evenings or on demand or anything until we go from 59 coach operators to who knows what, but at least, I mean, it's just, it doesn't seem like we have success in increasing coach operators. I looked at the data going back 3 years, and basically we oscillate between 50 and 60, down and up and down and up. And it doesn't seem like we have a breakout strategy on how to address this conundrum. And frankly, I think it's our highest priority. there's no higher priority, or we're not gonna be able to increase our, our hours, our routes, our on-demand zones, et cetera.
Well, the good news is we are increasing and we do have, I think, 4 in training now. And we just had another job fair and we had 12 potential candidates out of that we're reviewing in addition to those 4. And we do have a strategy. We are working on it. We're not any different than other transit agencies. We're working diligently to do this. We know that after safety, this is one of our most important priorities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Celine, I don't know who else is still online. Are there any other questions from the board? I have a couple of
Yeah.
questions, actually just one. I went through the community surplus vehicle program at our council meeting, and a question that came back to me after is, are any of the 4 vehicles, I'm looking at you because I know you know the answer, wheelchair accessible?
They all
All,
Well,
like, do they have
ramps.
wheelchair
I
ramp?
don't think any of them.
No, they're not. They're not ADA vehicles.
They're not
That's what
ADA,
you're
okay,
asking.
that's what the question was.
Yeah.
Because there was a nonprofit looking for, it, so,
Yeah.
okay, I can get back to that. And then, I think that's all about.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, and with that, we will turn the mic over to Paul for the finance report. Welcome and goodbye.
So I'll be reporting on, just going over the high points of the finance report for January 2024. First item is our cash sources. Sales tax revenue is up about 27,000 or 2%. And relative to the prior January. Next slide. You can see graphically that, this is January sales tax collected in November. Was down, about 1% from, what we had budgeted, or about $12,000. And then for this period, you can, for just the 1 month, 1/12, 8.33%, we're 5% below where we would expect. You also might notice there is, on the green line, the number of times that we haven't hit our budget, in the last year. So the economy is slowing and we're feeling the effects in terms of sales tax. Next slide, you can see no contract revenue. We just received our contracts from WisDOT. I'm gonna begin billing that this month, and so we'll see a huge inflow of revenue, but we're not seeing it yet. Next slide. Investment interest and rates, January interest of about almost $99,000. It was down 4% or almost 5,000 from last month. Invested, you can put this different investment possibilities. But right now we're invested in the ICTIP, which is the green, and you can see what's happening in the market. Interest rates have surged a little bit for the 2-year treasury. And the LGIP seems to be doing really well with short-term investments. At almost 5.5%. Cash uses, let's see how I'm missing a slide here, but I'll talk about cash uses. January payroll is at over $1 million. That's, I think, the first month we've seen that. It was up almost 300,000 or 41% from last month. Part of that is that we had a little bit of overlap with payroll payables from December to January. You see the payroll is listed at 1.3. Some of those quarterly taxes were paid in January, so our actual payroll, excluding those quarterlies, is about a little over $1 million. A non-payroll, 858,000, was down about $250,000. almost 23% from last month. And 125,000 or about 13% from last year. That large amount includes almost $500,000 of liability insurance, so. Gives you an idea of why it is so large. Capital or January capital payments, we just had Snap-on tools in January of almost $36,000. And the next slide, you can see how that and impacts our cash and our cash reserves. And where we're standing now, our cash decreased in January about $700,000, and we're now sitting at 59.5 million in total reserves. The next slide shows it graphically. You see a little bit of a tick down in January. But overall, we still have a lot of cash reserves, and I think we're still doing fine in that count. If you recall our budget, we were planning to spend down cash, and we're really budget actual revenue. You can see there's no grant income in January. Van Pool fares is up slightly over what we predicted. I think I heard Stacy say 27 vans. I think when we were writing the budget, we were between 20 and 25. So we're getting a little more revenue there. And investment revenue is below where we would hope, with our goal of 8.33, we're at 6.72. And sales tax is pretty much on target, but slightly below where we'd like it to be. Next slide, budget actual expense. You can see insurance, I already mentioned we had that one-time payment, so that's already fulfilled. And communications and utilities are slightly higher than we would expect at 8.33%. Subscription and fees, of course, a lot of those are paid at the beginning. So it's higher, but yeah, seen them.
Any questions from the board?
This is Melanie. So,
Great.
so hi, Paul. I'm trying to remember what I just saw. So our revenues were about half of what the goal was. Our expenditures were just a little more than half of what the goal was. You're not concerned about any of that?
You're talking about budget actual?
Yeah.
Well, you know, I am, as I explained, the federal and state grants revenues,
Mhm.
we didn't see any come in January. And so that amount, 4%. I mean, the figure itself is concerning, but I'm expecting those revenues to come in a large chunk, probably in a month or two. We could see, $5 million come in.
Okay.
And you'll see a big change in that revenue figure. And the expense side, also below our target too. So in terms of cash flow, we are experiencing negative cash flow for the month of January. But a lot of that has to do with that upfront $500,000 payment to our insurance company. So at this point, I'm not concerned. But
Okay.
I am internally concerned that I want to get those billings out to WISDOT and get that grant right now.
Thank you.
I'll do that. Thank you, Tom. Let's see, other business? Any other comments from board members? Hearing none, we will now meet an executive session to discuss with legal counsel representing the agency litigation or potential litigation as allowed by RCW 42.3 0.1101I. The board will be in executive session until, Matt, how long will we be in session?
I know, Todd, you need 10 minutes altogether, or
Sure,
does
Maybe
that
less.
include both executive session topics?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, so we'll be in executive session until 10:55 a.m. The board is not expected to take further action following the executive session.
And board member Norton, I'm assuming it's okay with our board chair, or vice chair, but board member Norton should participate if he wishes.
Great. I call the regular meeting back to order. There is no further action needing to be taken from the executive session. And at this time, if there are no questions or comments, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
Lance.
Nice not seeing you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, Commissioner Bacon, Johnson, et cetera.
Right, Todd, and everyone else, labor representatives.